Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our MasterControl hosted webinar. We're going to be talking about digital transformation that empowers workers, not replaces them. Before we get started, let's go through a couple housekeeping items. If you have any technical difficulties today during the presentation, just go ahead and use the chat function on the bottom of your screen. We'll go ahead and get that taken care of you as quickly as we can. If you have any questions today during the presentation, there's a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. You can ask questions anytime during the presentation. We're going to go ahead and answer those at the very end. Today we have Brian Curran and Katie Farley, both with our Manufacturing Excellence team, and I'm really excited to turn the time over to them.
Thanks, Jen.
So from the summary, digital transformation efforts often focus too much on systems and machines. We see this all too often. When you say digital transformation, people think about the equipment and heavy automation that's often seen on the manufacturing shop floor, and they lose sight of what's really important, which is the people, the operators out on the floor. So manufacturing technologies we submit should optimize processes and people to increase efficiencies and reduce human error. And MasterControl MX, you'll often hear us say that, Manufacturing Excellence, our EBR product, enhances worker performance to deliver shop floor speed, flexibility, and improved visibility. So with that, Katie, I'll let you introduce first.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian. My name is Katie Farley. I am a product manager with MasterControl. I've been at MasterControl for about 5 years, and I have the pleasure of working directly with our engineering teams who help define the future of the product, as well as with our customers to understand what their problems are and how we can translate those into solutions in the Manufacturing Excellence product.
Great. And I get the pleasure of working with Katie on all of those things. I'm in charge of customer success, which means I try to do pretty much anything I can to help our customers be successful, whether it comes from the product or services or support, etc. So hopefully you'll love this presentation because this is really a great topic that Katie and I enjoy sharing with you. So with that, let's go to that next slide. So cost of paper. So one of our customers estimated before they ever wanted to go into the digital process and their own transformation, they estimated they would save 14% of their FTE, full-time equivalent costs. Another customer estimated 30%. So we know with those two data points and many of our other customers who've had similar exercises, we expect our customers to be able to save 14 to 30%. Just by switching out the cost of labor on their shop floor to adopting a digital solution like MX. So that equates to roughly 6 to 12 hours per week per operator. The question is, in your own environment, how much could you save? And we characterize that as up to 30%, but we think that often when you include all of the costs, it should be higher than 30%. And we'll come back to that at the end of the presentation.
So looking at comparing paper to a digital system, really then by the nature of paper, being that there's no ability to enforce entries or control certain steps, paper is really easy to get wrong and pretty hard to get right in many cases. And that is in comparison to a digital system, which should be the exact opposite, meaning it's very easy to get right and hard to get wrong. And this reminds me of a saying in Japan that's spread globally now called poka-yoke. And this is a strategy to eliminate human error before it occurs by preventing defects so they're never seen by the end users or by the customers. And it translates to mistake proofing, which is very relevant to our discussion today. So some examples of this in your everyday life are things like how you can't start your washing machine if the door isn't shut, therefore you're not able to flood your home if you start the washing machine, or sink overflow outlets also prevent the same thing. And in our terms here, talking about software and digital manufacturing solution, this would mean that we're helping the operator to avoid mistakes in the first place by preventing them, helping them correct them, or drawing attention to specific issues as they occur. And we think this is exactly what our customers, life science manufacturers, are really looking for when they're evaluating a digital system. In fact, this comment came from a medical device executive that was working with us in terms of exactly how they were describing what they're looking for in a digital system, something that's really easy to get right and hard to get wrong.
And I thought that quote was really insightful because a lot of our prospects and companies we interact with, they really think about just going digital means instead of filling out a piece of paper, I'm keying it in. And an application, as the slide shows, a smart application should be able to do so much more than just help entering that data. It should have many more guidances, and we'll get into that in subsequent slides.
Yeah, more than paper on glass, is
More
what we
than
say,
paper.
right?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So we're really focusing on augmenting and optimizing the humans that are a part of the manufacturing process today. A lot of times when we talk about digitization on the manufacturing floor, some people think of a typical MES, manufacturing execution system approach for some lines that may already be highly automated or mostly automated. And a lot of times an implementation of that type of system can result in workers being completely replaced or no longer being needed. But the reality is a lot of processes are going to continue to involve humans, and humans are not going away. And this could be for a lot of reasons. Maybe,
Hopefully not.
no, we're going to be around for a while. The technical knowledge that might be required, for example. And in those scenarios, that's where we really want to focus on optimizing the process for the existing humans. And I think employees today have an expectation in their daily life, having access to so much technology and smartphones and internet and all the things that you can do on your phone, from ordering food to online banking, that they're going to go into their place of employment and have a similar level of digitization.
Just one more tidbit on this slide. We haven't said yet, but we tend to focus on life science customers. And so what Katie just highlighted in terms of humans still being heavily involved is even more common with medical device and pharmaceutical customers, particularly the ones that have high mix environments, contract manufacturers, some of the leading edge personalized medicines, et cetera. So we see more often than not that life science manufacturers predominantly have people. They may have equipment out there, but the people are connecting the equipment into what we would call a digital thread. Hopefully with an MX solution, it's a digital thread, not a paper thread.
Okay, so common problems with paper, and we have a lot to say on this topic. We probably have entire webinars on this topic, but we'll try to keep it to a slide's length here. So one thing I want to point out before I get into this is paper problems are not just operator problems, they're not just quality reviewer problems. These really impact everyone, the supervisors, the executives. It can affect the product quality and therefore patient safety. So all of these things really have a huge implication across the organization. So the first bullet there is data input errors. So of course on paper, I mentioned earlier, you really can't control what people are doing when they have a pen and a pencil and an open page of paper. So things like incorrect date formatting is really common. Calculations can be performed incorrectly, maybe with the wrong precision, which of course can have a very detrimental outcome. Sometimes it's difficult to follow the correct processes for things like adding notes, making sure that text is following the correct formatting, that expired dates are not entered, for example. And then poor data access and visibility. It's really difficult in the paper world to know what's going on in another part of the process. Maybe there's a value from earlier in the process that needs to be referenced, or to understand where someone left off in the process, maybe because of a shift change, for example. And when you can have batch records that are tens, hundreds of pages of paper, a lot of times at the end, those pages of paper are not all together. So you also have the issue of just lost pages of paper, and therefore that out of context information that you see on the slide as well. And then along with that, we have a slow review process. So when you're reviewing a completed batch record, device history record, that again is often more than 100 pages when it's all said and done, This is really slow and really difficult just because of the sheer number of pages of paper and really the requirement that every line has to be checked because you don't know what someone may have written, what type of step may be missed. So all of that is really painful and time consuming. And also as a result of that, it's really hard to be proactive, and instead we find that people spend a lot of time being reactive to things like checking when an operator has completed a step that they're actually up to date on their training, but of course this has happened after they've actually done it. Ensuring that when a piece of equipment is used, that it was actually within calibration, that the associated logbooks were completed. But again, the problem here is this is happening after it's already been completed. Okay, so let's jump into a demo to see what some of these controls and enforcements can look like and how a digital system can really optimize some of these processes that I've been talking about. So this is, of course, a demonstration of the MX product here. This would be the execution side where the operator is coming in to complete the production record. And in this next section here, they are entering a pH meter ID, and it's a little bit difficult to read, but you can see that it has a specific format, that it has to be PHM-4 digits, and you can see that they accidentally added an extra 0. So now they're going to take a look at that, see the out of specification warning, go back in, correct that, and there we go. The system has accepted that perfectly. Now they're preventing an unnecessary correction or time to be spent later resolving that. In the next one, we're entering a pH value. So if there is a value outside of 0 or 14, that would obviously be a mistake. So we would not want to accept that value. So it looks like that is a mistake, so it's not allowing 82 to be entered. I imagine that that was supposed to be 8.2, and you can see there's a secondary limit there, and it is outside of that secondary limit, the 8.2, but it was accepted. So there's a warning message, a general warning message, and then a more specific warning message asking them to notify their supervisor. And then they are also navigating to the review by exception page, and you can see that because there is a limit that has been exceeded, that is now on the review by exception page so that the quality reviewer or anyone who wants to see that information real time is able to see the review by exception page at any time that's going to have that information of interest, such as the numeric limits that have been exceeded. But in this case, the 8.2 is actually a mistake as well, so they're going to come back in and correct that. And you can see that the system is taking them into a correction process that they have to follow. So there's pre-configured reasons that they're selecting from. So those can be selected and then, of course, reported on and seen later. And then completing the correction, other things can be figured too, like a witness. So now it's within range, the warning has disappeared. And then we also have what we call a correction play-by-play that perfectly shows all of the relevant information from the correction, such as when it was started, the original value, who made the correction reason, and of course name and date stamped with all of that information. And then if we navigate back to the review by exception, which again is really kind of a live dashboard of everything happening within the record, you can see that there is now a steps corrected section that will include the step that was just corrected to get the pH value within the appropriate range. Okay, now that we've seen a demonstration of MasterControl's Manufacturing Excellence solution, we can take a deeper look at some additional elements. So what we saw there was just a demonstration of the execution side and some of the things that the operator would be looking at. But of course, there are many different elements to the system and many different problems that the system is addressing on top of a lot of the paper problems that I mentioned a few slides ago. So the first one on there is template management. For many life science manufacturers, many of them use Microsoft Word for their creation of their master templates. And it's very hard to collaborate in Microsoft Word as well as to share content across similar products, for example. Whereas in manufacturing excellence, you're able to create templates to reuse, as well as a concept that we call global elements. So one thing that's difficult to address in the paper world when you're using Microsoft Word, for example, if you have a standard process, a good example of that might be a line clearance form that's used in 100 different products. When you need to make a change to that, you're having to make that in 100 different places, and that can be very error prone and time consuming and can result in some inconsistencies that you wouldn't want across products that share the same process. So just an example of some of the problems that can be solved on the template management side in MX.
And in each of these 5 areas on the screen, we can have similar approach where in today's paper-based world, there's lots of natural problems that are very common to all of our customers. And then using MX, digital solution, we solve those problems. So similar to what's been described on the template management, we also have work instructions and quality events. Typically in the production environment, those are paper-based processes as well. So even if you digitize your batch record, then your work instruction is still paper-based. If your work instruction is still paper-based, it can be a rogue document. We've done that many, many years where we've helped customers with document control. Quality events are typically a piece of paper that also then, along with the work instructions and the quality events, those pieces of paper can be disconnected from the batch record. And so a full digital solution ideally would be able to digitize all the aspects, not only the templates and the batch records, but also the corresponding work instruction and the quality events.
And then the next one on there is review by exception. So I talked about this previously in the other slide that mentioned long review times. So again, in a paper process, you're really required in most circumstances to review every line because you don't know what may have been entered. You have to make sure that every step has been completed, for example, every date format's correct, every calculation is correct. The list goes on and it can be very time consuming. With a digital system, a review by exception concept is able to eliminate long review times by aggregating all of the information that's of interest. So we just saw a little bit of that in the demonstration where the review by exception page was showing things like numeric limits and corrections, and then you may have also noticed things like forms and attachments and notes are all on the review by exception page as well, just as an example. And then of course, there's no need to review certain things that are happening automatically, like every step being complete, date formats being correct, whereas of course in paper, these are things that do have to be verified and rechecked.
Next one is automated training, and really it should say automated training check. Typically what happens without a digital solution is the operator is supposed to have completed their training, and most of the time has. But when on occasion it doesn't happen, when does the customer detect it? Not until the very end during that long review process. And during that long review process, it's often somebody from the QA group reviewing the batch record that was completed last week. So it's more than just going somewhere to check if the training was completed. You have to chase down people and find out maybe that person was working on the first shift last week and the second shift this week. And it's really more challenging than it sounds. Ideally, what should happen is the operator shouldn't be able to perform the work instruction or that specific task until the training has been completed. So having a completely digitally connected system, we can prevent that from ever happening.
Yep, and all of this results in paperless production, which is the last item there, and this is the end result, which really benefits everyone through many of the points that we've made already. So through error-proofing data input, the ability to automate the traceability of changes, easily share data and insights, which we'll get into more detail later, shortening the review time, and then access to advanced analytics once you have that data off of paper and into a digital system.
Okay, so one of the things that we've been talking about is how a digital system is more than paper on glass. And this slide, we'd like to talk about that even more, go a little bit deeper. And we put in quotes there, a guidance system. And the example is if you think about cars today as compared to cars way back when, Cars today have these built-in systems to help prevent problems from happening. Lane detection, for example, and other systems in place, auto braking, adaptive cruise control, etc. All of those are designed to augment the driver. And if you've been fortunate enough to drive some of those vehicles, how reassuring they can be and painfully annoying at times as well. But the end result is to provide a safer end product for all of us. So with that, one of the examples we'd like to talk about is guiding operators through the work instructions. So Katie mentioned in her early example about the paper and how with a pen, pretty much you have free form ability to do whatever you want. In paper, in other words, in paper you can't limit the operator from performing a step before they're supposed to have to. In a digital system, you can create dependencies. So despite the operator being able to see a step that they can't perform yet or shouldn't perform yet, they could in the paper-based world, but in the digital, we just don't let them do that. And the system would present a message that says, you can't perform this step until the prior step is completed. That's one way that the system is able to guide an operator through the work instruction, just not give them a free-form ability to go anywhere they want in the batch record.
Yeah, perfect. And then the next one on there with numeric limits and thresholds, we really saw a great example of this already in the demo with entering the pH value. So you saw if the value was outside of 0 to 14, someone was unable to enter the data, but then different configurations were made when a value was entered outside of a different range. So when the 8.2 went in, there was a warning message and then a customized warning message, and then that was also displayed on the review by exception page. You can also notify certain people. We also have a specific configuration as an example for duration values that requires 2 timestamps to calculate the total duration. So if a limit exists on a duration before the secondary value is captured that would result in the duration being out of range, you can warn the user to make sure that they actually want to capture that value. So if you have a mix time set to be 29 to 31 minutes and someone captures the start time followed by the end time immediately as an accident that would have resulted in it just being a minute, we can prevent that error from happening in the first place with a pop-up warning modal. So just a few examples of some of the ways that we can protect with numeric limits.
And then applying the guidance system principle to the training aspect. I highlighted just recently how the system should be able to prevent an operator from performing a work instruction. And that's a highly desirable feature that's not often available through software systems. So that's great to have, but then the question comes up, what happens when the operator hasn't completed their training? Production's responsibility is get that lot or batch out the door. They're trying to do their job and get the production produced. So what a system should do and what a MX allows the trainee to do is once they receive notification that their training is not yet completed, because it's all digitally integrated, they just go over to the menu to the training task and complete that training task right there and then, which then allows them to go back to the production's record and then continue with their operation.
That's a very appreciated feature by many customers with training and MX. The next one, navigate corrections and signatures. So we saw a great example of this in the demo as well with the correction play-by-play and requiring the correction reason as an example. What I didn't point out in the demo, but you may have noticed, the logged in user, as they were entering information, of course they didn't have to re-sign off. The system was automatically capturing that user as the performed by, as well as the timestamp of all of the actions that they were taking, because of course they logged into the system with their Part 11 compliant signature. So just an example of some of the things that are really automatically taken care of in a digital system like MX. And then the last one, inform all operators of open deviations. So if you have a situation where you have a particular quality event that's affecting maybe current runs of a particular product and people are not made aware of that or it is missed, that's something that can be very costly and maybe result in scrapping the lot or could risk patient safety. So the ability to be able to indicate that a particular, let's say a deviation, is affecting a few other products this day, and the ability to make sure that people are aware of that and that the process is followed is really critical, and again, a great advantage in a digital system, because keeping track of this in the paper world is really difficult, as I'm sure some of you know.
In-process visibility. So one of the things I love to mention is just when you think about a paper-based system, who is able to see that? Well, really, it's only the people that are around the piece of paper. And so going digital enables the thing we call in-process visibility. But taking it down to the individual person or persona, these are very helpful things that we can do for the individual. So for example, the operator, what step am I on? If you think about multiple shifts and an operator in shift 2 taking over for an operator for shift 1, and there's a pile of paper, does the operator on the shift 2 know where the operator 1 left off on a complicated batch record? It can be really hard to figure that out. Or operator 1 coming back from a break. So a digital system keeps that placeholder in place so that when the operator is ready to do their work, it says, here's the next step that you are able to work on. What step is next? Also from the sequencing perspective and dependency, oftentimes companies want to be able to enable an operator or a team of operators to work on steps in parallel. Well, it becomes really confusing to operators if you're not quite sure which ones can be parallel or not. A digital system orchestrates that for you. And can I do that step now? My step, I may be working on something and Katie is in a different room working on another process, and mine is ready to go once hers is done. So how do I know when she's done? In a paper-based world, we have to come up with some kind of notification mechanism. In a digital world, the system just prompts me that says my step is ready to perform. Another aspect for the quality control person or anybody who's playing a supervisor role, if I know that I need to go line 5 once they reach step 23, how do I know in a paper-based world when they get to step 23? With a digital system, I can be anywhere in the building. I can be in a different building monitoring their progress so that I save a ton of time just going back and forth trying to figure out what step they're on and when they're going to be in that step. So in-process visibility really helps people, individuals. It's great for systems and executives, et cetera, but people on the shop floor are tremendously benefit from it as well.
Another common example is when someone knows that it's time for them to verify a step. So that's where the ability to notify someone when a step is complete is really helpful as well. Another example there. Lot runtime dashboards and the ability to display current runtime data alongside historic data. So this is very helpful to see the status along with what Brian was mentioning. If you can see the current runtime of a particular process that you, maybe the operator, is involved in compared to the fastest, slowest, and average times to really give them an idea of how they're doing. Or of course that could happen after the fact as well for further analysis to understand at a certain time or with a certain shift or with certain materials, how did these numbers compare to each other? So things like throughput metrics and error rates and out of specification and non-conformance events. These are things that you would now have access to because you have that data off of paper and in a digital system in a way that wasn't really possible before. It's also helpful for the operators and supervisors and even the quality reviewers, really anyone who's interacting with the production record, to be able to have those metrics so that they can have a good idea of what they're doing. So one that's not on here but could be is the amount of time that it is taking to review and release a production record once the rest of the production record has been completed. And we've seen customers see up to a 90% reduction in the amount of time needed to review and release, which is pretty amazing. So just having visibility into some of that information is really helpful for employees as well. So all the things we've talked about so far have been great benefits to a digital system, but obviously that system needs to be implemented, and having that be an easy and simple process is really critical. So that's where we get into flexible and simple system configuration.
So for example, the first bullet, solution maps to existing processes and workflows. The story behind that is most digital systems, regardless of whether it's a manufacturing or CRM or ERP, are really rigid systems that require a customer, when implementing, to adapt their processes to the way the software works. MX was not designed that way. It was opposite. MX was designed to be configurable and extremely flexible so that it could adapt and customers could implement their business processes, their batch records as they are today on paper, into a digital system. And this has been one of the things that our customers, the speed at which they've been able to do it, but also the ease during our sales process. We'll actually take a prospect's batch record and implement this in an hour or two, not the entire batch record, but just portions of it. So for us to be able to do that as a software vendor without knowing the customer's business process is really evidence that you can adapt the software to the customer's process.
Yeah, and when we have our implementation services on a customer site, it really turns into an opportunity for them to teach the customer how to build their own master templates, not for the customer just to dictate to the implementation services exactly what to do, because ultimately it's important, as Brian said, that the customer is able to go in and customize the process and the system and their master template so that it fits their need. And I think often people think that a digital system is going to resemble a completely different look and feel than what they might be familiar with today, especially for the operators who are used to paper. But with this kind of customized template, you can actually follow a similar process so that it's really not a jarring experience to move from paper to giving someone an iPad. And then we have the product family tool, and this definitely helps with flexibility and simplicity. The concept here is to help build and then also continue to manage the master templates for many products that are similar, often referred to as a product line. So it could be a product with many different flavors or labels, language labels, sizes, fill volumes, whatever the variations may be. The tool allows you to build out an initial master template and then identify those specific areas that might vary based on a configuration. So what step is different when you have a different flavor, and allow the rest of the master template to remain the same. And it gives our users the ability to encompass many product variations in one master template. And we've had customers report reductions of 100 to 1 or more number of master templates that they've been able to reduce because of the flexibility and simplicity of a tool like the product family tool.
Great, thank you. And the last one, Katie and I, probably the thing we enjoy most is working directly with customers to see how they benefit, and then also learning from customers. This fourth bullet represents a quote. We'll go ahead and give them a shout out. Robin Joyner at Wellington gave us this quote, "From yours to ours." And to me, it epitomizes what we're trying to do, and it highlights what MX did for them and does for other customers. And that is, in a paper-based world with the batch record, the nomenclature used by operators was, "Oh, your batch record." And the reason was they didn't have ownership. They didn't feel like they were part of it. It was on somebody's piece of paper or on somebody's Word document on their computer. And so to make changes or participate or collaborate, it was always your batch record. Once they've implemented MasterControl, it switched to our batch record. And the reason is they always know where the latest revision is. They can go into MasterControl, their own user account, and they get to see what the current batch record looks like. And so I really love being able to tie this slide or conclude this slide. Yes, the system needs to be able to be implemented easy, but going back to the theme of this presentation, making it easy for humans, switching from the verbiage from yours to ours, there's a huge, to me, huge power in just that statement.
Yeah, that's a great quote from Robin, and I think we have another one coming up, actually.
Oh, good. So, human-centric digitization. We want to, one of the ulterior motives in a positive way is increase time spent on value-added activities. And to help us think about that, we're going to highlight what are the non-value-added activities that customers spend or operators spend their time on today. Okay, so let's focus on or just highlight some of the things where we think employees should spend less time. In a paper-based environment, they are manually collecting the data. Then somebody is manually reviewing the collected data. Then, when needed, somebody is manually correcting the data. And then if there's a corrected data step, then somebody has to manually review the corrected data and then manually review all of that data again. So what we see is very common is humans are part of the process, life science manufacturers predominantly even more so. When there are humans involved with the process, without a digital system, you have human errors being created. And so customers have to insert extra steps and review processes to check for those human errors. And so that's what we're seeing here is all of that manual step plus additional review steps to try to catch the errors before it goes too far in the process and is detrimental to the overall product quality. And then on top of that, after you get through all of that, you're manually reporting data. If you get data, most customers don't have the data because it's all on paper. So sometimes customers are manually reporting data from selected segments of their batch process. So clearly employees spend way too much time doing the manual steps and doing extra verifications that really are extraneous.
Yeah, and with a digital system, we're able to eliminate the things that Brian just mentioned. So employees are able to spend more time doing things like analyzing data because, again, now they have that available to them. And one example of that in a way that makes an employee's life so much easier is when they need to search for something. So that could be just looking for maybe a material lot number and wanting to know where that's used. In the paper world, that could be going through hundreds of pages of paper looking for that one text, whereas in a digital system, you simply go to the report and search for that, and then you have your answer right there. So that can save hours every time that situation arises. The ability to solve problems and streamline processes, some of this just comes from the fact that employees now have more time to do that because they're not doing some of the things that Brian just mentioned in the previous slide, as well as because the information is digitized and the data is available, they also now have the ability to identify some of those areas that can be improved, whereas before that was really difficult to do. This also results in the ability to reduce rework and waste and improve yields. So some examples here might be your quality inspections and being able to identify, are there any factors that make inspections have higher failure rates if it's a particular material or a particular time of day. And then also, due to the visibility that you now have, you can potentially take action to prevent some of those issues from happening. In the example of AQL, if you're approaching your defect threshold, potentially can you step in and figure out if there's anything that can be done so that you don't reach the AQL threshold. Also, in the example that I gave earlier of maybe a deviation that is affecting multiple products, If that is missed, of course, that is very costly and can result in both rework and waste. So being able to eliminate things like that is really critical as well. And then getting more products to market faster based on many of the things we've mentioned, but a lot of that is the review by exception page. The product doesn't have to sit on the shop floor for days or weeks while the paper record is being reviewed. That process can really be expedited with MX. And then really the summary here is all of these things result in employees being able to focus on meaningful work. So less time pushing paper, chasing people down for signatures. Quality is able to focus on real quality.
So with all that extra time, the question is, what do you do with more time? Starting from the bottom of the slide, management often thinks about, well, you could focus on value-added activities like Katie just mentioned, optimizing processes, scale your company, etc. There's lots of things that can be done. The one I like to highlight in this human-centric theme is operators can go faster. They can do more. They can, whether it's 14 to 30%, whatever the percentage is, they're able to produce more. And those operators are out there going to work day in and day out to produce more. And more often than not, production is the lifeblood of the organization. So if production is able to produce more, the entire organization is able to get more delivered and bring in more revenues associated with that. So what do you do with more time? First thing I'd like to think about is you go faster.
And here's that additional quote from Robin, who's been a long-time MasterControl and MX customer. So he said, leadership now has visibility from anywhere in the company to look at a batch record. They can watch it in real time. It makes my job a whole lot easier because I'm not trying to justify and prove to them the benefits of it. They're seeing the true benefits, not just from a dollar standpoint, but from freeing up employees. So I think this is a great quote that really encompasses the value of going digital and the value that it has for the organization as a whole, but also those employees that are now able to do a lot of those value add activities, which I would bet are things that they probably enjoy doing a lot more than the paper pushing and the manual
Absolutely.
data tracking that Brian mentioned.
So this is an interesting one, particularly coming out of COVID, and that is MX or going digital. We're seeing this directly from our prospects and customers, feedback from them. They are better able to attract, engage, and retain talent, which is a big deal, and why I mentioned it coming out of COVID is throughout the United States and other places as well, I would expect it would be worldwide, you have a situation where employees now are able to move from one company to another. It's become more freely available to work remotely. And so lots of articles about how employees are doing more job hopping. And so also spoke to Florida Manufacturers Consortium, where their mindset is lots of poaching. Their term is lots of poaching is happening. So it becomes even more important. It's always important, but it's even more important these days to attract, engage, and retain that talent. So there's multiple ways that digital technology helps do this. And first one is familiarity or familiar. One thing that I would highlight is the operators on the shop floor, regardless of experience, we're all using technology. We all have and have become accustomed to leveraging apps for doing everything that we do. And it's abrupt, and we've talked to customers. It's really challenging to go try to hire a workforce that's going to have to come in and not use technology, but instead be forced to learn GDP rules and use paper and pencil. So just the familiarity with today's technology, being digital helps companies actually retain those employees and attract. Engaged. So the second one, talking about being able to be engaged. I like to think about it, Katie, do you have yours on? I have mine on.
Yeah.
Most of these have these on, and they have corresponding apps here. So the point here is we're living in a world where the operators are accustomed to leveraging technology and knowing that they are part of the system, not external from the system. And so by leveraging technology, using iPads and whatever technology they have on the shop floor, they can be more fully engaged with the production process. Productive, we've already highlighted many different ways that employees can be more productive. And the last bullet, really, or the icon, is satisfied. For all the reasons I already mentioned, the end users, when they adopt software systems, end users are rarely truly satisfied. But in the case of MX, because it was designed to mirror the processes that they already know and be super user-friendly and to feel more like an app, these end users and operators report being satisfied from the MX software. And more than satisfied, during pilot testing, it's very common for us to hear that our customers, they're on paper and then they'll do pilots with MX, and then the pilot will go away and they have to go back to paper. In those instances, the operators actually clamor and ask the sysadmins, when are we going to deploy this full time? We want to use the digital solution more than the paper-based solution.
Okay, yeah, building off a lot of what Brian said in terms of employee satisfaction and how important that is. And as he mentioned, I think especially as a result of COVID in today's culture and job environment, a lot of people had the opportunity to work remote or also may have lost their job and had some time to reevaluate what it is that they actually want to do and what is important for them when they're looking for their next role. And of course, there are many different inputs that are important when looking for a job. Compensation is one that is very common, but these other things like interesting job content, challenge, and recognition, these have been proven to be very important, if not as important aspects as well. And I think paper processes really do not lend themselves well to any of these things. Spending a lot of time on mundane tasks, and Brian's slide where he was talking about manual data collection and manual reporting, that doesn't sound fun to me and probably the vast majority of people. And also it's not challenging in a way that's interesting. It's maybe challenging in a way that's annoying.
Problematic.
And then it is also, as Brian mentioned, a competitive advantage for employees that are trying to attract, for organizations trying to attract not only their customers, but also their employees as well.
Let's just go to the conclusion. We started way back at the beginning of this presentation highlighting how our customers had evaluated going from paper to digital would save them up to 30%, allow them to scale faster, etc. And I intimated that it could be more than up to 30%. And what I meant by that is through the course of this presentation, we've highlighted job satisfaction, engaging employees, augmenting the operators. When you think about the churn that's associated with or the inability to attract employees and retain those employees, I would argue that the cost of paper, yeah, it seems like it's up to 30%, but they're probably not counting in as much as they should the negative ramifications of using paper on their employee workforce. And so that's why I would argue it's more than 30%. Is it 35? Is it 40%? I don't know exactly. It depends on your particular environment, but clearly it's easy to argue that it's more than 30%.
Definitely. So in summary, digital transformation on the shop floor should really focus on augmenting and optimizing the employees and the people that are and will continue to be involved in the manufacturing process, not replacing them. Manufacturing technology should introduce greater flexibility and be simple to use. So, of course, it's critical that it's easy to use, but also to implement, and that you have that high end user acceptance so that the digital system like MX can really be successful. And then lastly, digitization can attract, engage, and retain talent in a digitally connected, data-driven manufacturing environment. So again, very important in today's world and job market to be competitive and to make sure that employees are being offered an environment where they feel continually challenged and there's visibility around the work that they're doing so that they can be rewarded for doing a good job. Okay, thank you so much. I think it's time for some Q&A.
Shift.
All right. Well, Brian and Katie, thank you so much for your time today. There are just a couple of things that you guys brought up today that I think are very salient points. And the one is that when an operator uses manufacturing excellence, it's easier for them to be right and harder for them to be wrong. And that's really what we all want, right? Kind of in our job satisfaction, we want technology to make our lives easier for us to do the right thing. And the second thing was the retaining talent. So I was just at MD&M West a couple of weeks ago, and we had 3 or 4 people from a company come by, and I don't know if this is politically correct, but they were definitely of the younger generation. They were definitely of the digital generation. And when they saw a demo of MasterControl, they're like, man, I wish we had this. We're just stuck on paper. And so you can really see how that talent group that's coming up is going to really appreciate these kinds of technology advancements that really help them do their jobs better.
Nice.
So,
Absolutely, yeah.
all right, well, we've had a couple questions come in, so I'll just feed these out. So this is a good one kind of tying into what we were just talking about. For a company that's been relying on paper production records, how quickly can the manufacturing excellence solution be up and running and used effectively by employees?
That's a good question. That's one we love to answer, huh?
We do. We're just trying to figure out if you're going to answer it or I'm going to answer it.
You take it.
Okay. So this one, 30 to 60 days is what we like to, it's an attention grabber, because if you're using alternative solutions, you're usually thinking 12 to 18 months. And regardless of the software you're deploying, 30 to 60 days is crazy fast. So we always have to say, well, let's qualify that. 30 to 60 days for you to get a batch record up and running in parallel pilot for one line. So it's not deploying MX across your entire organization or multiple sites and doing integrations and things like that. But the reason we like to tout that is that's your first point of time to value. After 60 days, for those customers that have gone live in 60 days, they have eradicated all the paper-based problems that we talked about today. And they are gaining and enjoying the benefits of going digital. And then the task will be, after 60 days, well, how do I get it on more products, more batch records, and more lines? I could go on longer, but I thought that would be enough for right now.
That's perfect. And a lot of times when we're out and about talking with prospects and customers, there is a fear that taking on a digital technology project or moving from paper to digital environment is a monstrous project, and it sometimes can be overwhelming. And so implementing something like manufacturing excellence, where you get a quick win and quick rewards, it's that success breeds success, brings on that success breeds success mentality. Okay, so kind of related to that is how much upfront training is usually needed to get users comfortable using the system?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think there are 2 sides to that. So we have the builder tool where someone is building the master template, and then we have the execution side, which I think is what people talk about a lot, but I think both are equally important, because the builder tool we've built to be very user-friendly, and you don't need any special training or to engage with a technical person or to engage with MasterControl every time you want to build a new template or to edit one. It's very intuitive and easy to learn. There are a lot of configurations and options, so it can take a bit of time to really understand everything that's available to you. But to get in and just start adding steps and adding configurations, I think most people really pick up the basics within an hour or so. And then on the operator side, because, as we mentioned earlier, we're able to mirror a paper process. Of course, it's going to look a little bit different being an electronic interface, but it's similar steps. And then we have, you may have seen in the demo, kind of a left-hand navigation so that they can easily see all of the different areas and where they are currently. So all of that really helps in getting the end users trained in the system as well.
That's great. There's another question that's related to that, which is for your current existing customers, what's been the overall experience for getting employees buy-in for a fully electronic production record?
I would highlight the comment I said earlier, and that is typically the operators, once they go through the pilot experience and they've gotten a taste of the digital system, they're the ones asking, when are we going live? When can we get live? So the overall experience from the operators has been fantastic. They're usually kind of pushers or drivers for us. And I would say the thing that takes some time is just organizational change. How do we get our updated procedures in place? How do we make sure we communicate this change, et cetera? But the operators are usually on our side saying, come on, bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think when Katie was talking before about how you have to have a system that's not just easy to implement, but also easy to adopt. And that's really, I think, one of the highlights that we've seen from our customers who have employed manufacturing excellence is that the adoption rates are very high.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We would be unable to be successful without that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last question we have for today. How can operators get involved in providing feedback during the template building and pilot process?
I mean, I think there are many different ways that could be facilitated. One kind of story that comes to mind on this topic, a couple of months ago, I was talking to an operator and he was mentioning they started using the system in a pilot process, the initial batch record that was built out, and he said, oh, I told my supervisor, could you make this change and this change? And I didn't think she'd be able to do it, but I thought I'd just ask. And he was so blown away that she actually did it and was so grateful. And I thought, I don't think I'm going to tell him how easy that probably was for her because he was so impressed that she was able to do that. So just an example of how that process can be facilitated, really, I think, because it's pretty simple to go in and make those edits and changes based off of the feedback that whoever's responsible for building the master template is getting from the operators during the pilot process.
Right, and then your global deployment comment earlier as well, right? You can make changes to one, and then if it's something that's accepted, that helps improve the process, it's very easy to go back and implement that across all of your batch records.
So one thing I'd add to that one is Katie and I work together daily, but I don't get to hear all of the stories because we're not in on every conversation. So that's the first time I heard that story, which is fantastic, and it reminds me of one of our other customers, and it's the contrast. So how can operators get involved? With paper-based systems, they don't. In fact, what we see with customers is it's so painful to manage the change control process that the batch record has this pent-up demand of changes and improvements that they would like to make, but there's a risk assessment done. It's like, well, no, we don't want to make those changes because we know how painful it is to make the paper-based master template or batch record change. And so going from not being able to make changes to, yes, you can make a change. Wow, I can make a change. I'm just so excited. It's the contrast because you have to know how hard and challenging the paper-based environment is to truly appreciate that.
Yeah. Paper-based processes do not lend themselves to continual improvement, at least not easy.
Correct.
Do not lend themselves easily to continual improvement. Well, those are all the questions that we have for today. I want to thank Brian and Katie for the vast amounts of information that they shared today. I hope that everyone out there was able to get some good takeaways that you can take back to your organizations and share with your peers. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Should you have any additional questions about the product or you'd even like to request a demo, you can do that at www.mastercontrol.com. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.